everything else that we're doing to save the coral basically isn't going to mean anything if at the end of the day we destroy it all by acidifying all the ocean.
What's the final thoughts on the rapid decarbonization? How do we do it? Go.
I'm not sure if there's a rapid way to do it. I mean, yeah.
And I've invited Louie Psihoyos, Oscar-winning director of The Cove, amazing character here from Boulder, actually. And then, speaking of amazing people, there's Henk Rogers, who has been actively working on ocean solutions in Hawaii for a number of years, particularly from the perspective of how does renewable energy impact that. So, and because Sylvia Earle couldn't be here, we are just going to cut this conversation to a short 15-minute interaction. But, you know, Sylvia, if you're watching anywhere, you know, after the fact, you know, I hope you're having fun in Mozambique, and, you know, you're forgiven for not being able to get out of the hope spot that you fell into over there. Okay, so let me just start with Louie. I know you're working on some very innovative films and that relate to the ocean. What's your perspective on what's happening in the world's oceans right now relative to the buildup of CO2?
Well, you know, the oceans, the reefs are probably the first ecosystem to collapse. You know, two-degree increase in temperature, you know, you start to dissolve the coral reefs. 25% of the species in the ocean live on the coral reefs. It's, you know, 1 billion people rely on the fish from the coral reefs for food and sustenance. So I think that's where, you know, I'm most concerned. But when, you know, you look at what can one person do to help save the oceans? You know, I just did a series on food for Netflix. It comes out January 1st. The one thing we don't talk about is food. You know, it's the one thing that gives you agency over, you know, if you want to change the world, change what's on your plate. In this, I'll tell you, it's a 4-part series. What we did is everybody says, oh, I need to eat fish because X, I'm Hawaiian, or, you know, I need to eat meat because I'm from this part of the world. And I wanted to see, well, let's look at people from around the world, different you know, ages, ethnicities, and look at biological twins. We'll give one of them a whole foods plant-based diet for 8 weeks, another one an omnivore diet for 8 weeks. And we're going to measure everything we possibly can. Worked with Stanford University's top researchers in the world working on nutrition and medical. And we measured everything we could. Now here's the upshot. I wanted to do, one of the things I wanted to do was a telomere test. Telomeres are the end caps of your DNA. And as you get older, your end caps start to shorten. It's basically your DNA cannot repeat itself. So you get gray hair, your organs start to fail, you know, old people start to hunch over. There's a lot of reasons for it, but longer telomeres, longer life. And I said, I want to measure telomeres. And they said, don't bother. For 8 weeks, where there's only an 8-week study, you won't see any differences. And I said, well, it's my money. I've raised it. I'm going to do it. I'll get another researcher to do it. They said, no, we'll do it. So here's the upshot. The people on a plant-based diet, we also did DEXA scans. These are low-dose radiation scans of the body, and we can tell within like percentages of a gram how much people are losing visceral fat or gaining muscle, et cetera, et cetera. The vegans across the board lost visceral fat. Visceral fat is the fat around your organs that are diagnostic for metabolic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, and cancers, melted with the vegans. It surprised the hell out of the researchers. Nobody was expecting that. Also, the telomeres got longer. So the biological twins, their telomeres got longer, and the omnivores basically just flatlined, but they were getting slightly shorter. So you're going to live longer on a whole foods plant-based diet. You're going to have less chance of having metabolic diseases, and people on a whole foods plant-based diet live 10 to 12 years longer without disease, without chronic disease. So if you want to save the oceans, you know, stop eating fish, reduce your meat consumption, and you'll live longer without chronic disease. So it's better for the environment, it's better for your health, and it's certainly better for the animals. And people say, well, I get my animals from they're grass-fed. 99% of the animals, at least in this country, are in CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations. If you haven't been to one, it'll be almost impossible to get one because they don't let you into these places. If you just spend 10 seconds in a CAFO where they raise chickens or pigs, it'll make a visceral reaction in yourself. You'll smell that and you'll think, how could anybody be party to that? And so, again, if you want to save the world, if you want to change the world, change what's on your plate. That's how you can decarbonize the ocean, and it's how you can live longer without chronic disease. So.
Okay, well, thank you, Louie, and I really appreciate your pivot to food on decarbonizing the ocean, and I do appreciate what you're saying because there's, I think, the amount of carbon that we put in the atmosphere in terms of raising animals is something like 1/5 of all of it. So that's a big piece of the equation, and there's no doubt about it. Henk, how do you approach this, given that you've been focusing on renewable energy in Hawaii, et cetera?
Well, I'm just going to start by saying, did you just take sushi off my plate?
You could eat whatever you want.
No, it's like.
No, I ate sushi with you last night, but mine was all veggie sushi.
I get that. I totally get it. And I've eaten at a veggie sushi place in Hawaii, and it's amazing. So, yeah, theoretically I could totally do this, but it's.
I'll be a
it's just
pulper
hard.
at your funeral.
It's hard. Okay, but whatever.
Ocean
so anyway,
diet.
I've already stopped eating meat, and this grass-fed beef stuff is definitely a fairy tale. I have a ranch on the Big Island, and we're surrounded by cattle that are supposed to be grass-fed, not my cattle. But they basically, as soon as they get to be big enough, their bone structure is big enough, they get sent to. What are they called?
CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation.
They get sent to one of those places to be fattened up, and then they still call them grass-fed beef because they ran around when they were little, when they're calves in the wild, so to speak. I don't eat beef for sure, and I do think food is a very important part of it. I've got a mission, and I came on this mission. Let's backtrack a little bit. I moved from New York, the concrete jungle, to the beach of Hawaii in 1972. I learned how to surf, I learned how to dive. I was in the ocean every day. We were on the windward side of Oahu. I don't know I shudder to think what it would be like to go there and look at the fish now, or the coral now, because that's a good 50 years ago. Oh my gosh, 50 years ago. 50 years ago. Anyway, fast forward, I had the life-changing experience of a near-death experience in the form of a heart attack, 100% blockage of the Widowmaker. In the ambulance, I said, no, I'm not going. I still have stuff to do. I'm taking part of my speech for this afternoon. And anyway, I found my missions in life, and the first mission came to me in the back of the newspaper. It says, oh, by the way, we're going to kill all the coral in the world by the end of the century, caused by ocean acidification, caused by carbon dioxide, caused by us. And so I made up my mind at that moment. I said, no, we're not doing that. We're not that stupid. We're going to end the use of carbon-based fuel, and that's the mission I'm on. Everything else that we're doing to save the coral basically isn't going to mean anything if at the end of the day we destroy it all by acidifying all the ocean. And I'm not an oceanographer or marine biologist, but my guess is that it isn't just a coral that's going to be dissolved by ocean acidification. It's also going to be other plankton that also build little shells. And, we're talking about collapsing the food chain in the ocean. It's not just the coral. So I used the 25% of the species and all that, but actually we're seriously going to change the chemistry of the ocean, and we shouldn't really do that. So anyway, that's my whole focus is accomplishing that, because everybody is focused on the little things like, oh, let's just restore this reef, or let's build a new kind of coral that's a little bit more resistant to warm water, or all these things. And at the end of the day, if we don't solve the big problem, it's not just, of course, ocean acidification, it's a whole climate change that we have to solve. So anyway, that's my way of dealing with fixing the ocean, and that's my reason for doing what I'm doing now.
Great, thanks, Hank. How many of you saw the movie last night in here called Deep Rising? Okay. So, you know, a lot was said there, but let's remember that 71% of the remaining Earth's surface is the bottom of the ocean, and so far it's pristine, pretty much. So we've done a bad job of the surface, and in that bad job, we've dumped a tremendous amount of CO2 into the world's oceans. And in fact, the ocean, the biggest carbon sink in the world, and it's still taking it, but it's getting full. It really is getting full, because we have about 3 trillion tons of carbon, they say, that we've put up in the atmosphere anthropogenically in about 100 years. And the IPCC says that we have to take about half of it out. And the ocean isn't really, it's not really helping as much as it used to do that. That's why we're having these feedback loops and tipping points. So, you know, just to kind of bring this around in the last couple of minutes of this conversation with these two guys that have been thinking about this, you know, for a long, long time. I mean, Louie's got the Ocean Preservation Society. You know, you've been running that for how long?
15 years.
And so that's what led you to The Cove and then Racing Extinction and the other movies that you've been involved with. You know, Henk, you've been pushing 100% renewable energy in Hawaii. So, and the world, all over the world, and I certainly advocate both of these strategies. Guys, how do we, you know, yes, change our diets. There's the other things that we can do, but take Phil. We just saw a presentation where he's taking phytoplankton up and growing more of it. We know that the phytoplankton is the basis of the oxygen that we breathe. I think 3 out of 4 breaths I've heard from the phytoplankton. What's the final thoughts on the rapid decarbonization? How do we do it? Go.
I'm not sure if there's a rapid way to do it. I mean, yeah. You know, I had one of the first 3 electric cars in Colorado. I was powering it with 114 solar panels. I stopped paying for electricity when I did that, and I thought, I mean, I just want to say one thing. Technological changes happen really quickly. I learned that at AREDAY in about 2010. And you know, back when I was in my first AREDAY, there was a lot of oil and gas guys here, and they were saying, alternative energy is going to always be a niche market. It's so small, less than 1% of the grid. And electric cars were just a fantasy. And I was driving an electric car, not paying for you know, electricity. And Tony Seba came up and talked. He was a futurist. Changed my life, that talk. It really did. Because he said, these technological changes take about 10 years. This was probably about 2010. He says, you know, 3 years ago, we were hitting the number 2 key 6 times on our flip phones to text a capital C. Then he showed us a picture of the Easter Parade in New York of 1900. It was all cars. Oh, sorry, all horses, 1 car. Then he showed us the 2013 Easter Parade, and it was completely reversed. These changes happen really quickly, and it's happening right now with electric cars. It's happening with alternative energy. It's happening with food. I talked to Tony Seba for this last Netflix series I did. He says the same thing's happening with food. You know, the food that's coming online, the plant-based food that's coming online, the alternative meats that they have are going to be on pay parity with meat, and it's going to be, you know, the cow hasn't tasted any better in the last 1,000 years, but alternative meats, they can improve it every week. The nutritional profile is getting better, and it's getting cheaper. It says once that happens, it'll be the same thing that happened with electric cars. So my hope is that these technological changes are going to happen, and they happen really quick in about 10-year increments.
Yeah, so the technological change, for example, Phil's device, you know, it happens really fast if there's a demand for the technology. Like there's a huge demand for smartphones, and that completely obliterated flip phones in a very short time. So the question is, like if there isn't a financial gain to be made by somebody on any technology, then it kind of sits in the laboratory, it sits in the next phase, whatever it is. And you could say government funding could do it or some other thing, but that is even more difficult. Consumer demand is really fast. I hate to be the bringer of this. I met a guy who talked about sprinkling iron phosphate and thereby causing. And I understand that is a sledgehammer approach. It is the question is, can we survive without a sledgehammer? And maybe what we do instead of making it a sledgehammer is we spread it out very carefully and not so much. I don't know. We're looking for solutions here that are going to fix climate change in the short term. By increasing the phytoplankton in the ocean, not only will it suck down more carbon dioxide, but it will increase the fish catch. And fish is also something that everybody's talking about, like we're overfishing because whatever. And so if we can increase the phytoplankton, I don't know. I'm not the answer, the scientist in this equation, but I'm just listening to all possible solutions.
Okay, so I'm going to say mine is stop the burning. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Now, how do we do that? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I've had one piece of sushi in the last 10 years, and it was actually from the cell-based salmon. So they didn't kill the fish. They took a cell from the tail. They put it in basically a bioreactor, the same process they used to make beer, and they made sushi salmon sushi that tasted exactly like sushi, and it was like unbelievable. And I think that's probably the future of fish. Really, it's not farm-raised fish. It's not sustainable fishing. It's going to probably be that way.
What was your question?
I bring everything back to food.
Yeah, well, the question.
I'm hungry.
The question is, how do we save ourselves from ourselves without turning ourselves into, Soylent Green? Okay. So.
Yeah, just make sensible decisions. It's not that hard. I stopped eating meat. I bought electric cars. I took my ranch and my home off grid. And I moved to New York. I ride bicycle. These are all small personal decisions that everybody can make about your own life. I don't know what your situation is, but everybody has the ability and the responsibility to make little changes in their life. Change all your light bulbs to LED. There's still people out there with incandescent light bulbs. So those are small changes that we can all make, and we should all make them now.
GA showed us yesterday that the whales are the mother of the sea. I mean, you could really feel that visceral, the grandmother, the great-grandmothers of life on the planet, their sentient intelligence. I appreciate the fact that you stopped eating, seafood, not only because of the buildup of the mercury from the carbon and the mercury in the ocean, but also because of the ethical and the moral implications of eating life itself. And I think that we all have to come to terms with that. The decarbonization of the ocean has to occur in order for us to survive as a species. That's being made very clearly to us because the ocean sustains us all. I just want to finish this panel with a quote from Sylvia Earle, who couldn't make it, our dear friend, an AREI trustee, and she's very famous for saying, no blue, no green. So. That's it for me. Thank you very much. And the panel. Thanks, guys.